Namaste and good morning to all of you. Let's start our Sunday class with the Gita mantras. Om Parthaye Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayan Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamrit Varshine Bhagavati Mashtadashadhyayane Am Tvam Anusandhame Bhagavad Gita भवद्वेषिणीं नमो अस्तुते व्यास विशाल बुद्धे फुल अरविंद आयत पत्र नेत्र येन तव्या भारत तैल पूर्णः प्रज्वलितो ज्ञानमया प्रदीपः परपान पारिजाताये तोत्र वेत्र एकपाने ज्ञान मुद्राये कृष्णाय गीता अमृत दुहे नमः सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोगदा गोपाल नंदना पार्थो वत्सा सुधीर भोगता दुग्धम गीता अमृतम महत वसुदेव सुतम देवम कंस चानूर मर्दनम देवकी परमानंदम कृष्णम वंदे जगत गुरुम भीष्म द्रोण तटा जयद्रथ जला गांधार नीलोत्पला शल्य ग्राहवती कृपेन वहने कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थाम विकर्ण घोर मकरा दुर्योधन अवर्तने सो तीर ना खलु पांडवे रन्नदी के वर्तका केशवा पाराशरे वत्सरोजमलम गीता अर्थ गंधोटकम नानाख्यानक केसरम हरि कथा संबोधन अबोधितम लोके सज्जन षटपदे रह पेपिये मानम मुदा भूयाद भारत पंकजम कलिमल प्रध्वंसी न श्रेयसे मूकं करोति वाचालं पंगुम लंघ्यते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानंद माधवम् यं ब्रह्म वरुण इंद्र रुद्र मरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्ये स्तवे वेदै सांगपद क्रमोपनिषदे गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यान अवस्थित तद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यन्तं न विदुषुर असुरगण देवाय तस्मै नमः. So on Sundays we study Bhagavad Gita and we are on chapter 7, Gyan Vigyan Yog. And we ended our class understanding where Lord Krishna has given us the categories or the kinds of people who don't take refuge in him. That was verse number 15. So he said 4 kinds of people, they don't surrender to me. 4 kind. Namam dushkritnaha moodaha prapadyante nar adhma mayaha aprahit jnana asuram bhavam ashrita. He says the evildoers, the deluded, the lowest of men do not seek me. They whose discrimination has been destroyed by their own delusions follow the ways of the demons. So what are these 4 categories? The ignorant, that is number 1. Number 2 is those who lazily follow their lower nature, tamsikta. Number 3 is deluded in intellect. And number 4 is demonic, people with the demonic nature. We'll see that later on in Bhagavad Gita. There's a whole chapter devoted to explanation in detail about the Asuri Bhav and Devi Bhav. And the title of that chapter is Dev Asur Sampad Vibhag Yoga. That's a chapter number 16. So you can see that how much effort is made so that we can know what Devi Bhav is, where we need to move towards, and from where we need to get out of Sri Bhav. So quickly, let me tell you these 4 categories. Who are the ignorant? Ignorant means people who don't have the spiritual knowledge. When we are unaware of our identity as the eternal soul, or when we don't even know the goal of our life. So the lack of knowledge prevents them from surrendering to God. If we are all the time obsessed with our body, obsessed with the physical pleasures, obsessed with acquiring and possessing and earning, we are ignorant. So he says, these people, they don't surrender to me. And the second category, he said, those who lazily follow their lower nature. Laziness is tamsikta. In Hindi, it's called alasya. That's why I told you that saying alasya hi manushya naam sharir stho mahan ripu. It's an enemy of ours, the alas. So lazily when we don't try to move up. So that means they don't make any effort to surrender to God. They are under the force of the inertia. Tal matol, kal kar lenge. That kind of a nature. And third category, he said, those with deluded intellect. The people who are very proud of their intellects. Oh, I have such and such degree. They refuse to have faith in anything that is not evident to them. Right now, they refuse to surrender, because in order to surrender, you got to have faith in something which you cannot see right now. But by having a faith, you believe that someday I will experience it. Faith is always about something which is not evident, but our intellect, worldly intellect, just stops us from surrendering. So those with the deluded intellect. Then the fourth one is those with the demonic nature, asuri bhav. They may say that there is a God, but still they keep on doing the evil actions. They try to hurt. Godly way of thinking is we are all one. Godly way of thinking is love is God. But if our actions and words and deeds are opposite of that, then we have a demonic nature. So this is where we left our last week's class at. So now in the next verse, little positive tone. People who reach me, he says, they reach me through four different approaches, four different ways. He says, Chaturvidha bhajante mam, jana sukritina arjuna, artaha jigyasu artha arthi, gyane cha bharat rishabh. Chaturvidha. Chatur means four, vidha means kinds, four kinds. Bhajante, worship, love. Bhajante. Mam means me, janaha, people, sukritnaha, the virtuous deeds, pious deeds, sukrit. We all know su means good, do means bad. So this is a sukrit. Arjuna. Artaha, distressed. Artaha. Jigyasu, the seeker of knowledge. Artharthi, the seeker of material gain. The wealth, material wealth. Gyani, the wise. The people who are situated in this higher knowledge, Gyani. Cha means and Bharat Rishabh, best among the Bharats. Four kinds of virtuous people worship me, O Arjun. The dissatisfied, distressed, the seeker of knowledge, the seeker of wealth, and the wise, O best among the Bharats. So as I said earlier, now Lord Krishna is categorizing the kinds of people who do take refuge in him. Four kinds. Whether they are seeking the consolation in their moment of distress, the arth. See, that's where the arti word comes from. Arth, arth pukar. Or whether they are mere seekers of satisfaction for the demands of their body, or for the urges of the mind, or the questions of their intellect, or whether they are mere men of desires. They are striving hard to fulfill their desires, or they are trying to satisfy their emotions. They all need the energy, the godly energy, the capacity to feel and ability to act. So they are praying to God because they know that the energy is coming from Him. So let's look at the distressed first. Who are distressed? For some people, when they see that worldly supports are unable to protect them, whether it is for the physical body, going to the doctor, having the operation done, or relying on the money or the relatives or in the government, they go to God. They turn to God because they know that God is all perfect. Those are distressed. They give up hope from the world. Very famous example we all know from Mahabharata. Draupadi's surrender to Lord Krishna was an example of this type of surrender. She was being disrobed in the middle of that Kaurav Sabha. First, she counted on her husbands, then the pious elders, Dronacharya, Kripacharya, Bhisham Pitama, Vidur, or even King Dhritarashtra. They all failed. They could not protect her. Then finally, she clenched her own sari in her teeth. But she knew that piece of cloth which she had was very weak to protect her. Then finally, she said, Krishna. And Lord Krishna protected her. She had to just surrender. Can we surrender before we get into that kind of a predicament or not? So distress is that. Then the second kind, seeker of knowledge. You have the curiosity to know, jigyasu, where everything came from. Either you can rely on your own intellect or you can surrender to God. The minute you surrender to God, all that wisdom comes. But we just want to understand with our own intellect, which is finite. The minute we understand this finite intellect cannot understand the infinite. There is a proper channeling done. That's why in our meditation, what do? We surrender. We surrender at that time. Daily meditation, we are strengthening our surrendering muscles. I'm not the body, I'm not the intellect, I'm not the mind, I am the soul. Every single day we keep on doing it. And eventually we are there. So even for the knowledge also. That's the reason before we study whether this Bhagavad Gita or the Upanishads, what do? We recite those mantras. Those mantras are supposed to make us surrender. Whether we say the Om Purnamada Purnamidam, or whether we say Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu, or Om Bhur Swaha, all those mantras take our intellect towards that higher power. We are surrendering ourselves. So that is the seeker after knowledge. And the third kind, sure, in order to live in this world, we need material wealth also. We are very clear about it. And so these Bhagats, they are convinced that ultimate owner of all this wealth is God. We are only the custodian of it. Just like a little child or even a little grown up, the parents are there, will go to the parents, please help me. So this is what Arthi is. Remembering and praying to God, please God, I need, in order to survive over here in this world, I need this also. Help me to earn so that I can pay my bills. Artha Arthi. And then he says the Gyani, the wise. Wise are the people who are situated in that kind of a wisdom. The wisdom that we are the souls. They have reached to that understanding that they are tiny parts of God. Those are Gyanis. And their eternal dharma is to love and to serve God. So they just constantly engage in the devotion. So these four kinds of people. So if we are, our inclination is like this, whether we need money or whether we want some kind of a protection, or whether we want the knowledge, or whether we are already situated in that wisdom, constantly thinking about God and only God. Okay. Of these four types, who is the best? Lord Krishna himself tells us who's the best among these four. Tesham Gyani Nitya Yukta Ek Bhakti Vishishyate Priya Hi Gyanina Atiyartham Aham Sacha Mam Priya. Tesham, of them. That means these four kinds. Gyani, the wise. Nitya Yuktaha, ever steadfast. Ek Bhakti Vishishyate. Ek Bhakti means whose devotion is exclusive. Ek Bhakti. Vishishyate, highest or excels. Vishesh. Priya, very dear. He means verily. Gyanina, of the wise. Atiyartham, exceedingly. Highly. Aham, I. So means he. Cha means and. Mam, of me. Priya, dear. So of them, the wise. So that means out of these four, the wise, ever steadfast and devoted to the one, excels. Why? Because I'm exceedingly dear to the wise. He is very dear to me. It's that kind of a relationship. He is only in love with me, and I am in love with him. Ek Bhakti, Ananya Bhakti. So when you compare and contrast these four kinds of Bhagat, the Lord Krishna himself declares that the Gyani, with a steadfast mind, that is the one thing, Nitya Yukta, surrenders himself with an integrated devotion. That means the devotion is not dissipated by any other aspirations. It's a single point, it just loves me. That is the only reason. There's no other goal. but me for Gyane. See, for the other three, there could be different goals: to have more money, going to God; want a healthier body, going to God; or some other kind of a ailment, going to God. So still there are two, but for Gyane, God, 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 nothing else but that. The unbroken and all-out aspiration for the seeker to reach the God only, the self, that is Ek Bhakti. So it's not for the acquisition of something, but for the annihilation of all other desires. There's no other desire. Whether this kind of a devotee, a Gyani, can live in a palace or live in a hut or live under a tree or in a cave, does not even matter. Whether there are princely clothes on him or whether there's just a rag on him. Whether there is a full feast or nothing to eat, all is acceptable by Gyani. Because Gyani is looking at only God. So just remember that those who approach God in distress for worldly possessions or in curiosity do not possess selfless devotion as the Gyani does. Remember that. Slowly, maybe he will reach there. Those people will reach there too. Through the process of devotion. Because those are like a higher level of devotion. But currently they don't have that. Because in order to become a Gyani, the heart has to be pure. And they got to develop that kind of a knowledge that God is everywhere. And the eternal relationship is only with God. So then their devotion becomes exclusive and single pointed. Okay, so this is what Lord Krishna is telling us over here. But how about the other three? So he's saying that he's the best. How about the other three? Because they are also Bhagat, he said. So in the next verse, he's talking about again the other three. He says, Udara Sarv Ev Ete, this is verse number 18. Gyani tu Atma Ev me Matama, Asthita Sahi Yuktatma, Mam Ev Anutmam Gatima. Udara, noble. Sarv means all. Ev means surely. Ete means these. Titaha, situated, established. Sa means he means verily. Okay. Yukt Atma, steadfast minded. Yukt Atma, united. Mam means me, Ev verily. Anuttamam, the supreme. Okay. See, Uttam is best. Anuttam means supreme. Gatim, goal. Noble indeed are all these. So that means the other three also noble. They are noble because they are going to God. To get something, going to God. So noble indeed are all these, but the wise person I deem as my very self. Why? Because the steadfastness in his mind, he is established in me alone as the supreme goal. Very clearly he is telling us, those are also bhagats, but the bhakti is to get something from God. But they are coming to me, so they are also noble. They are surrendering to me. But Gyani, the reason Gyani is the highest, the best, or who excels because of the steadfastness in the mind and because his goal is only me. His goal is not to get more from me or get anything from me. He just wants to love me. It's almost like if a father or a mother has 4 sons, they all go to the father and the mother. They are doing the seva also. They love the parents also. But what is the reason they are doing the seva? It is just for the sake of doing the seva, or the seva has some other motive. So this is what Lord Krishna is telling us. So the motive behind that bhakti for a jnani is just to love me. There's nothing else in his mind. He may or may not get all 4 sons may inherit equally, but there could be one who is not interested. Whether he gets something or not doesn't matter. Just doing the seva for the sake of doing seva. This is what jnani is. So they all in their own way approach the same fountain of the infinite. They want to tap something from there. And the intention behind their actions or their mind is different. There is a different reason why they are approaching the God, the altar of God. So there's a lot of difference. There's a lot of difference. So that's what he says. Jnani is Vishesh. Vishishyate. That is called a Par Bhakti actually. When we studied Narad Bhakti Sutra few months ago, Naradji explained 2 kinds of bhakti, Par Bhakti and Apar Bhakti. The other 3 categories, those are Apar Bhakti. But Jnani's Bhakti is Par Bhakti. That is the difference. Very, very different from worldly love. This is called a divine love. Divine love is imbued with the desire for the happiness of the divine beloved. Remember that. Radha's love for Krishna is just to make Krishna happy. Self-interest was not part of it at all. She told Uddhav that, because Uddhav said, should I tell Krishna that you miss him? She said, start telling him that I miss him. If the smile goes away, tell him, no, I don't miss him. The happiness of my beloved should not wane. That is a divine love. Tat sukha sukhitvam. God, your happiness is the only thing which I desire. My happiness does not matter. That is a Parbhakti, and that is a Jnani's Bhakti. Is my Lord happy with my actions or not? So this is the difference. And this kind of a lover is very exceedingly dear to God. Exceedingly dear. So we got to believe these words. Because he is saying he becomes one with me. And that is what love is, when you become one. We want to become one with the wealth or with the worldly people or the worldly positions. For the Jnani, only goal is to become one with God. That's a Jnani. And what happens is, such a Jnani ever remains in the divine sense of identification with the self. This is what happens. And this is what Lord Krishna is telling us in the next verse. And another thing we're going to learn from the next verse is because ordinarily there's a common misconception between the people that is intellect is higher than the bhakti or not. Because there's always a debate. The Gyan Yoga is higher than the Bhakti Yoga. Lord Krishna clarifies it over here. Because ordinarily people say, no, Gyan is higher than the Bhakti, but Lord Krishna is stating that it's not. It's the reverse. He says that after cultivating Gyan for many lives, when the Gyani's knowledge reaches a ripened state, that bhakti has reached to that, par bhakti has become the par bhakti, he says that person surrenders to God. So let's look at it, what he's saying. Bahu naam janam namante jnanvan mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvam iti sa mahatma sudurlabha. Bahu naam of many, janam naam of births, ante after or in the end. Gyanvan, the wise, mam to me, prapadyate surrenders. Vasudeva, the innermost self. Sarvam, all. Iti means thus, sa means he. Mahatma, the great soul. So this is a Mahatma. We don't become Mahatma just writing a Mahatma in front of our name. We got to have these qualities. Par Bhagat is a Mahatma. Sudurlabha, very hard to find. At the end of many births, the wise person comes to me, realizing that all this is Vasudev, all this is innermost self, all this is God. Such a great soul, such a Mahatma is very hard to find. In order to go up is little difficult. In Ramayana, there is a saying, Jane bin na hoi pratiti, bin pratiti hoi na priti. So that means you need the knowledge to fall in love. Without knowing the real implication, the real importance, how can you fall in love? That kind of a love. When we know that God is everywhere, God is our mother, God is our father, God is our relative. Because of God, we can breathe. Because of God, we can even do good or anything. So that knowledge. And that God is everywhere, in everybody. That kind of a knowledge when we have, sure, we will fall in love. So that's why, Jane bin na hoi pratiti, bin pratiti hoi nahi priti. So Lord Krishna is saying that in order to fall in love, knowledge is needed. But keep on cultivating this knowledge. So that's why he's saying after many births, it's okay, do not become disheartened. Some people often say that, no, if I, without reaching to that level, if I end this life's journey, what will happen? Lord Krishna answered that question in the previous chapter. He said, because Arjun had the same doubt, what will happen? And the term for that is yoga bhrashta. I am moving up, but I am to this life journey, what will happen to me? Lord Krishna said, no. Whatever you do, it will go with you. You will be placed at the right place at the right time where you start your journey from there on. So that's why he says that end of many births. Keep on inching up. Keep on moving towards that Parabhakti. I want to love God and only God. And if you think that that's the place we are right now, that means we have traveled quite a bit. Hold on to this. Do not slide back. Do not slide back. Because people study the scriptures. A lot of people study scriptures because there's so many scriptures and they're so beautiful. People do study. They do feel fulfilled also here and there. But only a rare few we see are really living their life according to the principles which are told in that scriptures. Very few. So that's why Lord Krishna is saying that to find such a Mahatma is very hard. So durlabha, very hard. The rare few. But that doesn't mean that none, and that doesn't mean that only some. Anybody who puts an effort towards that, all of us can. There's not a limit to that number. If there's a limitation is on our part. Do we do the sadhana of that kind or not? If all of us do that kind of a sadhana, all of us can reach to that level. So we should have that faith in Lord Krishna's words. So the fact over here is that true knowledge will definitely lead us towards the devotion and ultimately devotion of the highest level. True knowledge. Okay, that just loving God for the sake of loving God, not for the fruits. So now in the next verse, it is shown why the people are not generally aware of this Parabhakti. If it's so beautiful, it is so fulfilling, and if this is the goal of our life, how come we don't see that kind of a bhagat? Or how come we don't have that kind of a bhakti in us? I'm going to just only read this verse and then we'll talk about it next week. Kame te te hrit jnana prapadyante anye devata tam tam niyamam asathaye prakritya niyata swaya. Kame, the desires, by desires. And over here, desires really mean material desires, worldly desires. Te means this and that, various. You can't even count them. Even if you look into our mind, how many desires are there? The worldly desires. That's that, this and that. And we don't even know. Sometimes we start from somewhere and end up somewhere else. Te. Harit jnana, carried away. That means when the wisdom has been looted away. Harit jnana. Prapadyante, surrenders, approaches. Anya devata, other celestial gods. Anya devata, the luminous beings. Tam, this or that, various. Niyamam, the rules and regulations, those are the niyama. Asathaye, having followed. Prakritya, by nature. Niyata, led or controlled. Savaya, by one's own. Lord Krishna is saying that those whose wisdom has been looted away, has been carried away. Something else became more important to them. By this or that, I want a son, I want a daughter, I want my son to get married, I want a better job. Somebody says, worship this devata. Tuesday, worship this. Go to this pandit. Go to that place. Light the diya there. Bend this way. Sit this way. Keep your face that way, up or down. That is a wisdom looted away. Those whose wisdom has been looted away by this or that desire, go to other gods, the devatas. Following this or that rite or a ritual led by their own nature. Over here, this nature means the prakriti of their own, swabhav of their own. He will tell us in the future chapters and verses. There's the tamasic gods also, which we call black magic these days. Or rajasic also, to get something worldly. And there's a sattvic also, and then there's a nirgun also. It all depends. What do we want? Do we want to stick with this highest, or do we want our wisdom to get looted away? Fall for those fulfillment of the desires. Somebody says, no, this place you go, your desires will be fulfilled. We just start going there. Somebody else says, no, go this way. I have gotten something from there. You move that way. We forget about the ultimate goal, the supreme goal, the godly goal, that God is everywhere. Stick to that. That's what Lord Krishna is saying. So we'll talk about more next week. This one. Okay, we'll start with verse number 20. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Visheshyate. Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much.